Russia, which has the second largest navy in the world, is about to lose this title with the Ukraine war. It should be noted that if a warship is newly built, it can be procured within 3 years. However, the ship commander who will command it takes 15 years. The commodore takes 20 years and the admiral takes 25 years. What if the naval power that emerged with such hard work is destroyed by unexpected attacks and losing important warships? Russia's in danger of losing its image in the seas. Let's take a look at the heavy blows that the Russian Navy took with the Ukrainian attacks. Ukrainian forces continue to be the nightmare of the Russian Navy with their successful missile launches. While Ukrainian missiles target Russian warships, the warships wait desperately for the attack. The commander of the armed forces of Ukraine released the images taken after the attack on a ship belonging to the Russian Black Sea Fleet. The clip was made public after the confession of a Russian admiral who for months denied that the Saratov warship had sunk. The commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Valery Zelensky, put the clip on his Telegram channel in which he said that a year ago, on March 24, 2022, the soldiers destroyed the ship in the port of Berdyansk. The Russian Navy landing ships Orsk, Caesar, Kunikov, and Novocherkassk were also damaged. However, Saratov did not survive the attack as easily as the other 3 ships. Saratov was blown up and destroyed as a result of successful attacks by Ukrainian forces. Valery Zelensky, commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, underlined that the legend of the invincibility of the Russian fleet was destroyed by well-intentioned attacks. Also, the sinking of Saratov came just after Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The incident occurred 3 weeks before the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the cruiser Moskva, was destroyed in an attack that brought a PR blow to Ukraine, as it is known. On April 13, Ukraine's Neptune missiles struck and sank the Moskva cruiser worth $750 million. The cruiser Moskva drowned in the depths of the sea on April 14. As a result of this attack, the Russian Ministry of Defense openly acknowledged the death of only 5 crew members. But according to Alexei Danilov, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, there were 510 personnel in Moscow at the time of the attack, of which 58 survived with the destruction of 4 warships in Berdyansk by Ukraine. The Russian Navy received another heavy blow. The blows that Ukraine inflicted on the Russian Navy revealed another reality. Ukraine will not stand still, neither on land nor in water, and will continue to move forward. Also, Russia acknowledged the loss of Saratov only on the first anniversary of the destruction of the ship when Felix Menkov, the commander of the Crimean naval base in Sevastopol, appointed by Russia, unveiled a plaque commemorating the killed sailors a year ago. The loss of the battleship Saratov was confirmed, according to a local news source in Crimea. The news source also reported that the crews of Saratov, Novocherkassk, and Caesar Kunikov were also lost. The media outlet noted that after a year of denial that the ships were hit by Ukrainian missiles, this is the first official confirmation that the ship was lost in battle. Meanwhile, US company Maxar Technologies has released satellite images showing the destroyed ship's proximity to the attack's fueling facilities. According to a Ukrainian news source, the damaged ship was lifted and taken to Crimea for repairs. The Ukrainian news outlet also reported that the commanders of the 2 landing craft damaged in Berdyansk were traitors to Ukraine because they took refuge in Russia in 2014. While the Kremlin is shaken by the blowing up of the Russian Navy, the Kiev leader continues to intimidate Russia with his statements. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, in his speech to the graduates of the Odessa Maritime Academy, said that Russian ships already know what awaits them in Ukrainian waters, also thanking the officers of the Ukrainian Navy for protecting the state in the naval defense sector. President Zelensky added that Ukraine needs victory at sea, on land, and in the air against the enemy. Vladimir Zelensky said that Russian ships have already memorized the only chance for themselves in Ukrainian waters. Russia's Black Sea flagship has already demonstrated what any ship threatening Ukraine will face: and it's only a matter of time before the Moscow ship repeats its fate. Our defense and security forces have proven conclusively that the Ukrainian Snake Island will not tolerate the enemy flag. And these, our dear Odessa graduates, are just 3 elements of the great naval war that is still going on. The Maritime Academy Emmy will participate and win. Also, Zelensky added, "You really earn the right to lead this heroic crew." Our soldiers who bravely and extremely effectively defended Ukraine at sea against overwhelming enemy forces. Please always keep an eye on your soldiers, protect them, and Ukraine help all who fight alongside you against Russian evil. Protect freedom of navigation, one of the key elements of global security, and protect those who peacefully and legally use Ukrainian territorial waters. Finally, Zelensky appealed to the Academy authorities not to forgive the enemy for any crimes committed against Ukraine and its people. Ukraine continues to besiege the Russian army from 3 sides with its successes on land, in the air, and at sea. This success of Ukraine does not go unnoticed by many military analysts. Mick Ryan, a retired Major General in the Australian Army, said this week that the Ukrainian army is the best in the world in its ongoing war with Russia. In his statements, Ryan talked about the different aspects of the Ukrainian armed forces and how they use a range of capabilities in their wars against Russia, such as missile defense, drone defense, and frontline combat units. Ryan stated that the Ukrainian army is the best army in the world. According to Ryan, the Ukrainian army has proven in 13 months that it is the best army in the world. Ryan said that honestly, they've shed a lot of blood now to learn the many lessons they've learned. They lost a lot of young men and women, old men and women, but they are the best army in the world. We have a lot to learn from them. Also, Ryan consists of several elements of the Ukrainian army. According to him, the Ukrainian army has a regional defense force, a professional army consisting of veterans and newly mobilized soldiers. Ryan emphasized that there are many independent units in the Ukrainian army. Mark Kansian, a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies International Security Program, said that Ryan is absolutely right in emphasizing the human element in warfare, particularly training and leadership, and there is no doubt that the Ukrainians have more. On the other hand, Kansian continued to cite the different training received by the US military compared to the Ukrainian military, which received only 2 or 3 weeks of training before going to war. According to Kansian, every sailor recruit receives 22 weeks of training. The Ukrainians are sending 2 battalions through combat training in Europe. In a typical year, the US Army sends about 60 battalions to similar training. Kansian stated that most of the Ukrainian commanders are very skilled on the battlefield, but Kansian said Ukrainian commanders probably lack the depth of training necessary to perform complex joint maneuvers. The Ukrainian commanders, who allegedly did not have the necessary depth of training, have so far managed to inflict heavy damage on the Russian Navy. In summary, the Russian Black Sea Fleet, which was based jointly with the Ukrainian Navy in the Sevastopol port of Crimea until 2014, experienced significant returns in its conflicts with the Ukrainian naval forces. These range from the loss of the flagship Moskva by Ukrainian anti-ship missiles to Navy drones remotely commanded by Ukrainian personnel targeting Sevastopol. As the conflict enters its 2nd year and Putin has repeatedly expressed his determination to achieve total victory, the Russian Navy's contribution to achieving this goal remains problematic. The performance of the Russian Navy during the special military operation was inadequate as the Russian army begins its 2nd-year offensive on Ukraine. Putin, so fond of Russia's Soviet past, better ponder the impact of the prolonged military incapacity during the First World War on the 300-year-old Romanov dynasty in 1917. You can support us with the Super Thanks button below. The Black Sea has long been the scene of a rivalry between Russia and the West, strengthened by the Ukraine war. The giant pond on Europe's southeast flank has long been an arena of international competition between the US and its European allies on the one hand, and Russia and its sphere of influence on the other. This dynamic has been strengthened by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The collision of a Russian Su-27 fighter jet with an American surveillance drone the other day was a stark reminder to many countries operating in and around the Black Sea of the region's potential to be a flashpoint. At this point, the attitude of the US administration and the Russian administration further clarified some facts in the world order. The balance was fragile, but the US administration is professionally keeping the balance against this crazy move. Let's examine in detail the event that brought the Black Sea to its flashpoint. As is known at the beginning of this week, an event occurred that would increase the temperature in the Black Sea to the maximum level. The incident took place amid escalating tensions between Russia and the United States as the Biden administration tried to isolate Moscow over sanctions and its invasion of Ukraine. A Russian Sukhoi Su-27 fighter jet collided with the U.S. Air Force MQ-9 Reaper user air system over the Black Sea in the early morning. Russia forced the plane to land in the Black Sea in what U.S. forces called an unsafe and unprofessional interception. US military officials said the unarmed Reaper drone was flying on a typical reconnaissance mission when it was captured by two Russian Su-27 fighter jets about 100 kilometers southwest of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula, which Russia uses as a base to launch devastating attacks. The encounter of the U.S. drone performing a typical reconnaissance mission with Russian warplanes escalated tensions between the Kremlin and the White House. The collision occurred just after 7 a.m. as two Russian Su fighter jets flew into the MQ-9 Reaper drone over international waters west of Crimea, the U.S. European Command said in a statement. The statement also said the Russian pilots were trying to disrupt the U.S. plane before it collided several times before the collision. The Su-27 were reported to have dumped fuel on the MQ-9 and flew in front of it in an unprofessional manner. Later, one of the Russian fighters crashed into the propeller of the drone. It resulted in U.S. forces having to drop the MQ-9 in international waters. The incident shows a lack of competence as well as being insecure and unprofessional. After the collision, the Russian Su-27 is believed to have landed at an air base in occupied Crimea. It's not known whether there was any damage to the Su-27. Russia's defense ministry, on the other hand, denied any collision and claimed that the drone, which cost $32 million, was shot down due to the mishandling of the pilot. Also, the Russian Defense Ministry claimed that the U.S. plane was flying with the transponders turned off. Transponders are communication devices that allow aircraft to be tracked. In another development, Russia will try to find and recover the remains of a U.S. military drone shot down in the Black Sea. With that, Russia plans to benefit from the technology of the unmanned aerial vehicle. The White House took steps to protect its military property after an advanced U.S. Air Force drone collided with Russian warplanes in international airspace. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said in a statement that the United States does not want the wreckage of the downed MQ-9 Reaper drone to fall into the hands of anyone outside the United States. For this, Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria, which have a coast on the Black Sea, should take action to save the Allied aircraft. Among these three countries, Turkey is the first candidate to save the U.S. plane in terms of its Navy power and Black Sea influence and also its relations with Russia. In other words, the USA has to recover the MQ-9 together with Turkey. The confrontation of other countries with Russia in the middle of the Black Sea has the potential to further escalate the current tension. On the other hand, the unprofessional behavior of Russian planes and the statements made by the Russian Ministry of Defense are quite remarkable and reckless. The only question that comes to mind following this incident is, did Vladimir Putin go crazy? The next move of Putin, which caused the tension in the Black Sea to rise, is a matter of curiosity. As is known, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has escalated. The tension between Moscow and Washington and the Black Sea has begun to come to the fore even more in this time period. Russia blockaded Ukrainian ships in its port. However, Ukraine was able to export its grain by sea under an agreement signed last July between the two warring countries. At the same time, Ukraine attacked Russian naval ships in the Black Sea and in the port. In April, a Ukrainian missile sank Moskva, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. The war also mobilized the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in particular by strengthening ties between Washington and members of the Russian border, including Poland and the Baltic states. NATO countries have poured billions of dollars in military aid to support Ukraine. However, the alliance tried to avoid direct conflict with Russia, a nuclear-armed state. NATO countries have consistently avoided engaging in a direct war with Russia. However, we will wait and see if the latest event in the Black Sea skies can change this stance. Now let's take a closer look at the geography of the Black Sea. The Black Sea is larger than California, with 6 countries on its shores. 3 of these, Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria, are NATO members, while others, such as Ukraine, are friends of the alliance, which has long felt the Black Sea is necessary for efforts to contain Russia. Turkey has a tremendous influence on the Black Sea as it controls the 2 straits, the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus, which ships must cross in order to cross between the Black Sea and other global waterways. The 1936 Montreux Convention gives Turkey the right to close the straits to most military traffic in times of war. This was a mandate that Russia used after its invasion of Ukraine last year. The Black Sea is crucial to Russian President Vladimir Putin's efforts to expand Moscow's influence and has been a focus of instability resulting from it. In recent years, the periphery has been the scene of Russia's war with Georgia. In 2008, political upheavals against Russian-backed leaders in Ukraine and Belarus, and a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia in 2020, eventually mediated by Moscow. But Mr. Putin's biggest power play around the Black Sea was Russia's invasion of Crimea, a strategic peninsula that it seized from neighboring Ukraine in 2014. This strengthened Russia's position in the Black Sea and gave it control of Russia's only hot water port, Sebastopol. Russia's enemies responded by intensifying their own military maneuvers around the Black Sea. NATO members made regular surveillance flights, and the US and Britain frequently sent warships, although international conventions barred them from staying more than 21 days. The subsequent Russian invasion of Ukraine caused both sides to further expand their maneuvers in the region. In addition, Turkey's closure of the straits to most military traffic in order to prevent Russia from supporting its naval forces against Ukraine with ships coming from other places also prevented ships from the United States and other NATO countries from entering the Black Sea. But the air is still clear, so NATO members have stepped up surveillance flights over and around the city, and Russia has responded with warplanes as a show of strength. With the recent tensions, Turkey is becoming indispensable for NATO in the Black Sea and beyond. So let's take a look at the factors that make Turkey indispensable. Ankara has been a calming and healing balm for the world since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began. Whatever the outcome of the ground war, the Russian Navy will remain barren in the Black Sea for the foreseeable future. Ukraine has the potential to become an important Black Sea naval power on its own. From the smoke and dust of war, Turkey emerged as an important global player by underlining the importance of Ankara in maintaining regional peace. Ankara's use of authority given by the 1936 Montreux Convention to close the Turkish straits to foreign warships going to conflict zones once again reminded Ankara of its importance for the region. Turkey became the dominant naval power in the northern waters. This is the new reality in the region for policymakers at NATO. Russia's attack on Ukraine is a reminder of Turkey's importance in the Black Sea region for 3 reasons. For example, it is in NATO's interest that one of its members has sovereign control over the Turkish straits, which has directly affected Russia's action against Ukraine. In addition, Russia is legally prevented from reinforcing its Black Sea fleet with ships from the Pacific, Baltic, or Northern fleets, since no ship can enter the Black Sea. Turkey's closure of the straits to Russian ships. You can support us with the super thanks button below. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications in order to be informed about new videos. Our contents are carefully prepared by our expert team. Thank you for watching us. Undoubtedly, Bakhmut is the place where the Ukrainian war took place most intensely. Bakhmut has now become a matter of life and death for both countries, and whoever loses here will be taking a big hit for this war. The Russian army continues its offensive operations in Bakhmut, but the offensive potential is decreasing day by day. The Russian army is now losing its offensive potential in and around Bakhmut since the Ukrainian armed forces doubled the number of troops and military equipment in Bakhmut. Attempts by the Russian army to attack have been fruitless. Russian troops are trapped on the outskirts of Bakhmut. In addition, the Russian army carries out unsuccessful attacks in Avdiivka, another important city like Bakhmut, over the past week. The Russian army has attempted around 1,000 attacks in 5 directions in and around Bakhmut. However, these efforts of the Russian army were inconclusive. The Ukrainian army succeeded in repelling about 90% of the Russian attacks. Only a few of the Russian missile and drone attacks were successful. In particular, the Ukrainian troops deployed US HIMARS troops around Bakhmut with their Western third-generation tanks, air defense systems, and new ultra-range missiles. In the hottest clashes in Bakhmut the other day, the Ukrainian army destroyed 6 Russian arsenals in one night. In this success, the US-made HIMARS missiles had a great advantage. Still, the Russian army is desperately continuing its armed aggression against Ukraine, focusing its main efforts on attempts to completely control the Donetsk and Luhansk regions within its administrative borders. The Russian army continues to conduct defensive operations in the Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shakhtarsk directions. The fiercest clashes continued for Bakhmut and in the direction of Avdiivka. The Russian army continues to use its usual tactics of disturbing the civilian population and bombing residential areas and critical infrastructure facilities. So what about the front lines? During the past day, the Russian army launched 4 missile strikes, 24 air strikes, and more than 30 strikes. But Ukrainian air defense units repelled most of these attacks. According to the data of the Ukrainian General Staff, the Russian leadership continues to use the infrastructure of the Republic of Belarus to train its troops. The Russians maintain their military presence in the border regions. During the past day, the Russian army destroyed 3 settlements in the Chernihiv region, 5 settlements in the Sumy region. It bombed 7 residential areas in the Kharkiv region in the Kupiansk and Lyman directions. The Russian army continues its attempts to break through the defenses of the Ukrainian troops. The Russian army conducted unsuccessful offensive operations in 4 residential areas near Lyman, 5 settlements in the Kharkiv region, 2 settlements in the Luhansk region, and 3 settlements in the Donetsk region came under Russian artillery fire in the direction of Bakhmut. The Russian army continues to attack, but the offensive is losing its potential. The Russian army does not stop trying to capture the city, losing a significant amount of manpower, weapons, and military equipment. Ukrainian defense units repulsed numerous attacks of the Russian army, and the northern parts of Orikhovo, Vasilivka, Hiri, Horlivka, and Bakhmut came under Russian fire around the clock. In the directions of Avdiivka, Marinka, and Shakhtarsk, the Russian army attacked in the settlements of Novobakhmutka, Krasnohorivka, Avdiivka, Seven-Pervomaysky, Maryinka, and Pobieda, but without success. 9 settlements in the Donetsk region, including Avdiivka and Volodar, came under Russian fire. Russian troops hold the defense in the Zaporizhia and Kherson directions. Settlements close to the contact line, especially Novopil in the Donetsk region, 8 settlements in the Zaporizhia region and the cities of Antonivka and Kherson in the Kherson region were exposed to Russian attacks, but the Ukrainian defense units could not open the steel curtain. Over the past day, the Ukrainian Air Force has carried out 5 attacks on Russian army clusters, and missile and artillery units struck an ammunition depot, 2 anti-aircraft missile systems, a radar station, and another important Russian object. It is not clear how many Russian soldiers died in the attacks of the Ukrainian army, and the Russian Defense Ministry still has not made a statement on the subject. The devastated city of Bakhmut has long been the focal point of the war, as Russian forces seek to reinvigorate their military operations in the east. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky visited the front line in Bakhmut, where fighting has raged for months. His visit came as Russian forces launched a series of attacks on Ukrainian cities near Kiev and in Zaporizhia. The Ukrainian army said it shot down 16 Russian army drones, but 5 of them hit targets. 8 civilians lost their lives as a result of the attacks. 7 civilians were killed in the attack on student dormitories in Rizhikov. Then a rocket hit an apartment block in the southeastern city of Zaporizhia, killing 1 person and injuring 25. Local leaders said the death toll could rise. While denouncing Russia's attacks on civilians, President Zelensky also visited the Eastern Front, where Ukrainian forces have been keeping Russia out for more than 7 months. Zelensky last visited the area in December. Footage released by the presidential office showed him giving medals to war-weary soldiers in an old industrial warehouse. Zelensky said he was honored to be in Donbass in eastern Ukraine and to reward, thank, and shake hands with the heroic Ukrainian soldiers, adding that the Bakhmut defense would never give up. So why is Bakhmut important to Russia and Ukraine? UK military intelligence said a Ukrainian counterattack west of Bakhmut would relieve pressure on the main supply route to the city, and the Russian attack on the city could lose the limited momentum it had. Clashes continue around the city center, and the Ukrainian defense is at risk of being encircled from the north and south. The battle for Bakhmut reaches a critical point as Russian forces are sending assault troops on suicide missions, seizing land inch by inch and closing the city like a vice. As early as January, Ukrainian commanders said the city was not strategically important. In the last 2 weeks, they have changed their minds, rejecting the idea of a pullback even as the losses increase. Generals say Bakhmut is a key element in Russia's efforts to weaken its military ahead of a critical Ukrainian offensive, using fresh Western-trained troops and modern equipment supplied by the United States and its allies. The armed forces of Ukraine described the defense of Bakhmut this week as the key to the stability of the defense of the entire front. Wave after wave of Russian soldiers are thrown into the chaos of war without any synchronized coordination and direction. Both sides suffer heavy casualties, but Ukraine says the odds are largely in their favor. Soldiers fighting in Bakhmut this week described the fierce urban battle as a grueling effort against troops from the Wagner PMC group, which led Russia's offensive line there, with troops mostly recruited from Russian prisons. The Bakhmutka River, which divides the city in two, is now the line between the Russian and Ukrainian positions. Russian troops crossed the river south this week, threatening Ukraine's control of the city center, while the Ukrainians were digging improvised trenches next to housing blocks damaged by weeks of shelling. They detonated Russian positions with mortars and rocket-propelled grenades. Both sides are short of ammo. Western officials say that while Ukraine procured shells ahead of its planned offensive, Russia was also hampered by low artillery stockpiles. Ukraine's armed forces in eastern Ukraine said Russia is currently firing 20,000 rounds a day along the front line, a third of what it was just a few weeks ago. Doctors of the Ukrainian army go to Bakhmut every 2 days in the US-made M113 armored personnel carrier. There was only one reliable route to the city, a lifeline through which troops and supplies ran through the village of Ivanovsky. Ukraine is making repairs under Russian fire, but it is now a dirt road after constant shelling by Russian forces that moved within a mile of the highway. When it rains, the roads become nearly impassable, a muddy swamp that only vehicles like the M1 and M3 can traverse. On each trip, they search the bombed-out buildings at the western end of Bakhmutka and drag out their comrades, many of them wounded and some dead. Information from the front indicates that Russian troops of the Wagner PMC group carried out attacks without artillery or air support and were advancing despite being beaten by Ukrainian tanks and mortars with only Kalashnikov rifles from the north and south. Russia is trying a pincer movement that will trap the Ukrainian defenders of Bakhmut inside the city. It heads northwest towards Saratov, a town that faces Bakhmut and is often seen as a second line of defense should Bakhmut fall. A unit from Ukraine's 17th Tank Brigade is trying to stop this offensive by taking a position 800 yards from the Russians who are attacking an important road to Bakhmut. Wagner's troops move along the rows of trees, continuing to advance, even when under fire. The fight for Bakhmut is one of the three major wars in eastern Ukraine. In the south, Russia largely stalled in its move to take Volodar. It moves north, advanced T-90 tanks, armored personnel carriers, and mobilized troops strained for mechanized advance towards the town of Lyman, where fierce fighting is raging. If Ukraine can launch a successful counterattack and drive the Russians out of Bakhmut, more and more bitter wars are likely ahead. After all, we should not think that this war will end in Bakhmut. Amid allegations that Russia is preparing for something much bigger, the Russian military is far from the beginning of the war. It is not known what the following days will show us, but the current trend is that the Bakhmut war will not end soon.